This Day in Sports History. And welcome back to another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. It is October 15th, and on this day across the annals of sports history, we had Volume 1 of Catholics versus Convicts, Kirk Gibson with a most improbable home run, and a riot in Boston that led to a fan boycott. All that plus a non-sports fun fact about one of the many traits we as humans share with rats. But let's start with what happened on this day in 1988, when the top-ranked Miami Hurricanes traveled to South Bend, Indiana, to play the number 4 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Miami was the defending national champ, riding a 37-game regular season winning streak. Since Week 2 of the 1985 regular season, the only games the Hurricanes had lost were the 1985 Sugar Bowl and the 1986 Fiesta Bowl. Notre Dame was also undefeated coming into this one, and memories of the 58-7 rout Miami had given to Notre Dame back in '85 were still fresh for many of the Irish, even though Lou Holtz had taken over in '86 and there were a lot of new faces. But it still fueled this into something bigger than it already was. Notre Dame college students are credited with coming up with the Catholics versus Convicts slogan, printing it on t-shirts and selling them in the parking lots before the game. Miami had gone through a very public dismissal of 2 defensive players in the weeks leading up to the season because of off-field arrests that summer. Lou Holtz said he objected to that label because not everybody who went to Notre Dame was Catholic. This was also one of those games where the action on the field lived up to the hype swirling around it. Now, there was a pre-game fight between the Canes and the Irish players that had to be broken up with police wielding billy clubs. The tension was incredibly high in this one, and it stayed that way throughout the entire game. The Irish got off to a great start after Pat Terrell picked off a Steve Walsh pass and raced 66 yards for the score. Notre Dame led 21-7 midway through the second. But Miami fought back, and with under 30 seconds to play in the half, they tied it up.
They can take a shot at a touchdown. Walsh pulls it out. Has protection. There it is. Cleveland Gary for the touchdown. Miami does it again. Just what they do best of all. What a fabulous college football team working against the clock.
The Irish scored a touchdown and a field goal in the third quarter, and the lead was 31-21 heading into the fourth. Of course, you can't have a game like this without a little bit of controversy, right? Miami narrowed the lead with a field goal of their own, and then down 7, they got the ball back, and they were deep in Notre Dame territory. Walsh found Cleveland Gary over the middle inside the 5-yard line. He was tackled, and the ball came loose.
Miami puts it down. Notre Dame pounces on the loose ball. Walsh is quickly there. Was he called down? Notre Dame ball. They have fumbled at the 1-yard line. Jimmy Johnson furious.
Now that was a huge play, and it really depends on which side you were on as to which way you saw it. Gary said his knee was down before the ball came loose, and it should have been 6, or at the very least, should have been a first down inside the 2. The man responsible for dislodging it, George Streeter, said the ball was out well before Gary's knee hit. The refs saw it like Streeter did, and they gave the ball to Notre Dame on the 1-yard line. But Miami would get another chance. With 50 seconds to play on a 4th down and 7 from the Irish 11, Walsh found Andre Brown for the touchdown. Or did he? That play was also controversial. Replays of it showed that Brown, it didn't look like he truly had control of the football. But both refs had thrown their hands up in the air, and of course, no replay review back then, so the call stood, and it was 31-30. And then it was decision time for Jimmy Johnson. Instead of kicking the PAT, he gambled, and he went for the 2-point conversion. Walsh's pass for the corner was knocked down by Pat Terrell, the guy who had the pick 6 earlier in the game. Notre Dame recovered the ensuing onside kick, and they salted away the final seconds to win 31-30 in one of the all-time great college football games. ESPN did a 30 for 30 documentary of the game, and it is the most watched doc in that franchise. Notre Dame won the remainder of their games that season and went on to win the national title with a win over West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl. Miami also won the remainder of its games and finished number 2 in the country after beating Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. On this day in 1988, Jack Buck could not believe what he saw happen right in front of him, and most of us couldn't believe it either. The Oakland A's were favored to win the '88 World Series. They had a near murderer's row of young hitters like Jose Canseco, who had just become the first 40 home run, 40 stolen base guy in Major League Baseball history, and he would be named MVP of the American League in a couple of weeks. Fellow Bash brother Mark McGwire had a bit of an off year with just 32 home runs in '88, but he led the league in homers in '87 and of course would eventually go on to set a new single-season record for homers a decade later. As a team, the Dodgers did not figure in the top 5 of any offensive category except for team batting average that season. Kirk Gibson led the team with 25 home runs that year, and he would be named National League MVP in a few weeks. But Gibson was listed as day-to-day on the injury list, and he didn't start Game 1 due to a hamstring injury he'd suffered in the National League Championship Series, and he also had a very swollen knee. In fact, it was so swollen he could barely walk around. LA had solid pitching, though, with soon-to-be Cy Young Award winner Oral Hershiser on the mound, and maybe that could keep the Oakland Bats at bay. But many assumed that the A's would simply overpower the Dodgers, and a 4-game sweep was not out of the question. Oh, and the A's had the best closer in the game at that point in Dennis Eckersley. He'd led the American League with 45 saves, and he would finish second in the American League Cy Young balloting. In essence, if the A's had a lead in the bottom of the ninth, it was going to be lights out. So on this day, it was Game 1 of the '88 World Series, and maybe the tone for this one and what would eventually happen was set in the first inning with an unlikely home run by Mickey Hatcher, the man who was replacing the injured Gibson in the lineup. With a man on in the bottom half of the first, Hatcher, a man making his first plate appearance in the World Series and who'd hit just 1 home run all season long, unloaded on a Dave Stewart fastball and parked it in the left field seats to make it 2-0 Dodgers. He became just the 17th player to homer in his first World Series at bat. Canseco would erase that advantage in the second with a grand slam to make it 4-2 A's. The Dodgers added a run in the 6th to make it 4-3, and it stayed that way into the bottom of the 9th. Stewart was replaced on the mound by Eckersley, who got the first 2 batters out. Mike Davis came to the plate, and Lasorda sent Dave Anderson to the on-deck circle. Davis had hit Eckersley pretty well in the past, so he pitched around him a bit, feeling that a walk would probably not hurt them with a weak-hitting Anderson coming up after him. Technically, you don't want to put the tying run on base, but with 2 outs and a guy who'd hit just 2 homers all season on deck and Eckersley on the mound for you, well, the odds would probably be in your favor. And so Davis took ball 4 and trotted to first. But Anderson was a bit of a ruse in the on-deck circle. Kirk Gibson had been swinging a bat and hitting off a tee in the Dodger locker room. Lasorda had watched him take some cuts and felt it was worth a shot. So he pulled Anderson and sent Gibson to the plate, down a run with a man on and 2 outs. Gibson's right knee had ligament damage and it was badly swollen, and he was in severe pain. His left hamstring was also on fire, making walking, let alone running, painful. Here's the legendary call by Jack Buck that night.
We have a big 3-2 pitch coming here from Eckersley. Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw. Is this really happening, Bill?
It is happening, and they've got to help him home.
That was the first home run that Eckersley had given up in nearly 2 months. According to BaseballReference.com, the chance for a Dodger win in that situation was about 4%. It was the only appearance by Gibson in the series. The Dodgers would also win games 2, 4, and 5 to beat the Athletics 4-1 to win the World Championship. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. On this night in 1989, Wayne Gretzky became the all-time point scorer in the NHL, passing Gordie Howe. The Los Angeles Kings were on the road playing at Edmonton, where Gretzky had spent the first 9 years of his NHL career, and he led them to 4 Stanley Cup titles. This was just the second year with the Kings, but here he was on the doorstep to hockey immortality. At the start of the night, Gretzky needed only 1 point to tie and 2 to pass Howe's mark of 1,850 career points. He assisted a Bernie Nichols goal in the first period to pick up his first point and tie Howe, but as time wound down in the third and the Oilers on top 4-3, it appeared that the celebration was going to have to wait. But the great ones always seem to have a flair for the dramatic. And at 19:07 in the third, Gretzky swept a backhander past goalie Bill Ranford to tie the game at 4. But more importantly, it gave Gretzky his 1,851st point of his career, becoming the new NHL career points leader. The game was paused for several minutes to honor the moment, but Gretzky was not done for the night. With the score tied, it went to overtime, and Gretzky netted the game winner at the 3:24 mark to win the game for the Kings 5-4. Gordie had amassed his points over a 26-year career. Gretzky had done it in just over 10. On this day in 1946, St. Louis Cardinal Enos Slaughter ran a stop sign and surprised the Boston Red Sox with his bold base running. This was Game 7 of the 46 series. The game was tied at 2 in the bottom of the 8th. Slaughter led off with a single, but after a couple of flyouts, he was still there. He was getting a little bit antsy. The next man up was Harry Walker, who lined one to the gap in left center. Slaughter took off at the crack of the bat. Boston center fielder Leon Culberson got to the ball before it could roll to the wall, and he threw it into shortstop Johnny Pesky. Now, Pesky expected to turn around and see men on first and third, but instead, he saw Slaughter streaking for home. He had blown through the hold-up sign at third, and he kept on chugging. Pesky's hesitation cost him precious time, and his throw to the plate was up the line and late. The Red Sox threatened in the top of the 9th, but they couldn't score a run, and the Cardinals were World Series champs thanks to what became known as Slaughter's Mad Dash. And let's finish off today in 1912, when the Boston Red Sox were in another World Series. But this story is not specifically about the team. It's really more about a group of fans called the Royal Rooters and what happened to them. At the time, this group was the most famous of supporters of any major league team. There were several well-known and prominent men amongst the group, such as Honey Fitzgerald, who was JFK's grandfather, along with well-known tavern owner Michael Nuff Said McGreevy. They traveled with the team, cheered their team loudly, sang songs, and gave opposing players a really hard time. Another thing to know is that the Royal Rooters always sat together and in the exact same section of seats known as Duffy's Cliff at Fenway Park. Well, on this day, 113 years ago, it was Game 7 of what would become an 8-game series between the Red Sox and the New York Giants. Game 2 ended in a tie. They ran out of daylight and there weren't lights at stadiums yet, so instead of finishing it the next day, they played an additional game. However, the players were not compensated for playing an additional game in the series. In fact, their share only came from gate receipts to the first 4 games. So if you want to understand why a Black Sox scandal could happen in 1919, it was things like this that kind of added to players' discontent with owners. All right, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I thought that was important to kind of point out. Okay, so back to what happened in this one. The Red Sox were 1 win away from winning the series. A ticket seller, though, had made a mistake and sold the Duffy's Cliff section of seats to somebody else. When the Royal Rooters got to the game and found out their seats had been double sold, they rioted. The Rooters broke through the outfield fence, marched around on the field, and bothered the players. The police were called in to restore some manner of order, which took several minutes, delaying the start of the game. The Sox starter, Larry Gardner, must have cooled off in the melee and allowed 6 first-inning runs once play resumed. New York went on to win Game 7, 11-4. McGreevy led a demonstration in front of the Red Sox box office and declared a boycott by the rooters for Game 8. They missed Boston's 3-2 win to win the 1912 World Series, but they were all seen celebrating the championship in the streets of Boston after the game. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Did you know that rats are ticklish? Yep, just like humans, a light tickling touch will make the rat laugh. Oh, so you've got your doubts because you never heard a rat laugh? Well, that's because a rat's laugh is in the 50 kilohertz range, well outside of human hearing. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.